Thank you. Like I said, just yell at me anytime. Let's, I think what we ought to do is try to get the RFP in, 85, 90% of what we think it is. Call the RFP meeting, send it out ahead of time to the vendors. Let them come in and tell us what we need to change to make it better. Is that everybody's sort of idea of what we're trying to achieve on this?
Can we just talk quickly about our definition here? Troy had a nice email follow-up in terms of two elements to it, kind of and I think we've had some other discussions of, some very specific projects to include, as well as kind of developing a larger overall plan. And again, I think where I'm still a little confused, is it one RFP? Are there separate RFPs for that? What level of detail are we trying to achieve? Again, whether it's one or two or that type of thing.
Anybody want to approach that? I can tell you what my understanding, actually from Kerry, is that he wants a very involved master plan. It wouldn't be shovel-ready for the projects, but it would definitely be looking at whether those routes are viable routes or not viable routes. So if you're going to cross 30, what's the plan to get across 30? Can you get across 30? Those sorts of things, but it would not necessarily be environmental studies and things like that at this point in time.
So that's one RFP with some projects with as much detail, with a lot of detail, and maybe some other projects more aspirational at this point.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
That's kind of
But-
the way I looked at it too, and that's why I kind of characterized it as like RFP one and RFP two. One was kind of more smaller things that might be achievable quickly, and another one would be something that would be larger in scope and understanding for the future to build.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm a little bit confused with this. So to me, it doesn't make sense we'd have an RP for the same, we were saying we're getting a price from somebody, right? An estimate of what it costs. So if we're doing the Chinworth Bridge extension, that's gonna be one thing. Suitable launch site, it seems like we'd be getting different proposals for each one of those, right?
Well, but this isn't a proposal to do the work. This is the trail system master plan,
Okay.
from which we would then take and say, Chinworth Bridge probably isn't a great example because that may be a different, more immediate funding source. But say we were going to build north from the city up to North Webster to catch the trail system up there. That would be saying, here's the route we think you ought to take. We've reviewed this. We think this is all doable.
So again, this is the request to put the master plan together. And some of the projects are going to be more, we've identified as immediate opportunities, and some other projects would, again, be kind of pencil on paper on potential route to get there. But then the final RFP would be the work to actually, the RFP is request for proposal. The work coming from that proposal would be then the detailed work probably to determine the more feasible plan for the
Right.
bigger view, right?
So if this plan came back and said, here's the route we think you ought to take to get to North Webster, continuing the analogy, then there'd be an RFP potentially, what's it going to cost us? And what's your plan to build that actual route, to actually do the work? Does that make sense?
And
At some level, it's a more granular plan than our current master plan.
Well,
Very focused.
it's analogous, right, to
I
the,
know.
to
oh,
the,
good, this might be the answer.
yeah.
Couple things I guess I maybe like to bring you up to speed on too. Last week, we did have a couple meetings. I know me and Troy were able to connect last week, but we did have or I guess it's 2 weeks ago already, that we had our meeting with the combined commissioners and council. The approval did go through as we had hoped for, which that was that pretty much all the CBG funds would be distributed to the 3 communities that are a part of HELP. But that still allows the counties 1.2 million of ARPA funds that we've set aside for the projects to still be intact for the projects that are on the SIP and the HELP program. So those projects that are on that are the Chinworth Trail Extension, the Master Trail and Blue Way Plan. I think the canoe launch up at Tippy Lake or Lake James, and then also three different broadband projects. So I think there's still a very high probability that, you know, the Chinworth and the Master Trail are going to be selected as part of that help program. So those are things that I think we're planning. I thought I seen Amy was hoping for like August, that
August
those
1st,
would
I
be,
think it is.
be brought to the council and to the commissioners and ARPA for final project selection. So I guess I would see the goal you guys would be shooting for is trying to, you know, those projects could be happening really, really quick. Which I know you're working on the RFP for the master plan, master Blueway plan. But I do think there's a difference between what you're gonna want from a master plan to an actual plan that you're gonna build a project with. One's more architectural, landscape architect, planner type versus civil engineer, very detailed, drainage, environmental, all those things that are gonna go with it. So although I think we want to do as much homework as we can as we build our master trail or master plan, that we know what projects are real and can be built and somewhat of a cost estimate, that we're not asking for a $10 million bridge that goes across US 30 or something that's crazy. So I think we want as much as we can, but at the same token, there is two separate parts that once a project is decided to move forward, there will be a whole nother level of complexity and detail that'll need to be done by kind of almost a different, I can't see, now sometimes you've got firms that'll do both of those, but I think it's kind of a different set for a master trail plan than it is for the design of the actual project. So I think you'd have two separate ones.
Carrie, do you see us potentially bypassing the trail master plan as it comes to Chinworth and the boat launch and moving forward?
I think we're going to have to, just because timing-wise, ARPA funds have to be fully committed by the end of '24 and completed by the end of '26. And I know the monies that are through help, but I don't know that these dollars would be in this bucket, but I know the CBG funds, I think they have to be totally committed by the end of this year and spent by the end of '25. It's a little quicker because they want to make sure that those monies are going to be expended and completed before the deadline, you know, because when you think about, you've got multiple communities that have these dollars. Okra is still responsible for them. They're just trying to build more time into the system, so they're requiring an even shorter time frame than what the ARPA dollar requirements are. But since we'll be using our ARPA dollars, I'm pretty confident that our timelines, our restriction on the timelines would still be the same. But still, the sooner we know what those are and what those cost estimates are, the better we can plan.
So I'm sort of thinking from that, we're probably looking at maybe 3 plans going out right now. Because I don't think you necessarily want the same vendor who's building the Chinworth extension, putting the boat launch in. And a trail master plan's a much different thing, so I
But
think.
again, I think the detail of those is dependent on the approval in August of moving forward on those projects, whereas the RFP we're discussing
Needs to go out.
coincides with the
Right.
trail plan.
Right.
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 So I think it's probably included in this initial plan, and then if nothing else, after the fact, it's pulled aside. I mean, I think it's still gonna be one of your top projects in your list of things you're really gonna want them to make sure they've spent a little more time on. But I do think that that's gonna be, my hope would be if we had a selection in August, I mean, that there's an RFP for the design of that, later that year, and, a year from now, we've got a shovel in the dirt on that project, so.
So for the Chinworth Trail Extension and the potential James Lake paddler launch,
Right.
do we still need to do income studies related to
No,
them?
because we're not using any of the CBDG funds. All those requirements have been waived. So because it is the county's ARPA dollars, and the ARPA dollars that we're pledging towards that were actually income replacement dollars. So even some of the requirements that were on there on what those dollars could be used for are lessened a bit. I mean, we still need to make sure we're checking all our boxes and we can have some tiebacks back to COVID, but, pretty much trails and those types of things are pretty easy to do that with, so. but we won't have to do, that was one of the nice things,
Yeah.
since we don't have any CBDG funds that'll be part of our funding for the county projects. At this point, we won't have to do any income studies. If for some reason, let's say one of the other communities, their project doesn't qualify or they don't meet the income study, and then all of a sudden, we wouldn't want those dollars to go unspent, so that would be where the county might have to come back in and do an income study, because I do believe that the Chinworth, you know, and that was some of our selection of that particular project was with the demographics on the west side of town there, we really thought that that would qualify for CBG funds if we did a, you know, a defined area of impact and did an income study only on that defined area. Because right now, I think the county's income level is such that it's outside even the margin of error that Okra said, you know, we would have to have a specific area and a strong case for even, for them to allow us to even do an income study. So that's why we really seen it as an opportunity to be able to help the communities that had a lot higher opportunity, a lot higher chance of being able to meet that criteria of the income.
Does that help everybody?
Yep.
Thank you.
You know, Marcia, I see you're here. Could you give like just a quick overview of the RFP process? You sent it to me, but could you tell us what it is too? I think that might be helpful.
Having that with me, but basically the RFP process, we have a procurement policy here at the county. So the RFP process is something that you have to follow when you're putting things out for bid. So there are guidelines on if it's a service that you don't have an RFP process. Yeah, usually you have to get 2 to 3 bids for comparison, and that's always a good idea for that. And there's a dollar amount, how you do the notices for that as well. So I can absolutely send that out or give it to Rhonda, and she can send that out because she does have
You
that as
send it to me,
well.
I can send it to everybody else. So
Okay.
let's presume, just, we do the pre-RFP meeting. You'll send those out, correct? Because you're the purchasing agent.
I am the purchasing agent. If you're going to do notices, those will be sent out by the auditor's office. If
Okay.
it falls under that realm of the procurement policy, those notices would be sent out for advertising by the auditor's office.
Okay, and then we have the pre-RFP meeting, and then when we actually finalize the RFP, that's sort of the same process, it gets advertised by
Yes,
the auditor.
yes, and then that has to be done in a public meeting.
And then when they're open, do we as a board open those? Do council open those?
I believe that that is something that can be done here because it's going to be dollars that will be in your budget at
Okay.
that point in time. If it's going to be paid for under the guidelines of the ARPA, I believe, Carrie, that would come to the commissioners for the commissioners to open, and you would then make a recommendation.
Okay, so I'm not sure I caught that. So
Yeah,
for paying,
well,
the
the-
ones in ARPA are approved by the commissioners.
Correct.
The commissioners want a recommendation from us then?
Correct.
Okay,
So I think if those bids were opened by you guys, I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. But then we
No.
would expect you to bring to the commissioners a
Yeah.
recommendation of
Yes.
who and for what reason you're
Right.
selecting. They were low, or this person had a more complete scope, or whatever those criteria were that you made your selection or recommendation from.
right.
As long
That
as it's
makes
all
sense.
done in a public meeting
Right.
and follows the appropriate guidelines.
Does that make sense to everybody? Any other questions? I thought maybe a little discussion of process would be helpful.
And I know Rhonda can help you with the notices, because those, typically, those quotes, the RFPs would come back to her office. She would bring them to this meeting. You would open them in the public meeting. You can table those and for discussion, and then vote on it at the next meeting, or you can make a recommendation and, after your discussion, and send it on to the commissioners and make the presentation and your recommendation at their public meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, normally you would open them, table those, so you could consult with your consultants, MACOG or others on making that recommendation, to then bring to the commissioners for approval.
okay. So looking at the request that they did for Elkhart and Goshen, just to get an idea of time frame, they issued the request October 14th. The parties could request a pre-bid meeting. I think we're going to mandate a pre-bid meeting. Pre-bid meeting then was November 7th. They had to submit by November 14th. So that's a pretty quick turnaround. So maybe one of the things we could do today, and Donnie, speak up if you have any input into any of this about what's going on and we're screwing something up. I think we need to plan on when this is going to go out. I think we ought to try to select a pre-bid meeting date and the room availability, and then the submission deadline based upon our meetings. That appears to me to be one of the things we ought to achieve today. Anybody not agree? Okay. Why don't we look at some calendars?
So it will be August 1st before there'd be approval for the Chinworth extension for the master
You
plan.
would have to have approval from the ARPA commissioners and council to spend those ARPA dollars before you could actually send it out. And you can have all this
Everything lined up.
RFP completed, ready to go, but until those dollars, your project is selected and those dollars are approved, you wouldn't be able to send it out for a quote.
Right. So we potentially could do the pre-RFP meeting. We just wouldn't want to put out for an actual bid.
Other than you could be wasting a contractor's time if for some reason the project didn't get selected.
Okay.
I
What,
would probably wait until the project is selected before I actually had a meeting. I mean, you can have it all keyed and queued and ready to go. And that doesn't mean that MACOG or others can't have already made contact with some firms that they think would be in the running. Because the other thing, and I'll just pre-warn you, just from a capacity perspective, is, their contractors are busy right now, including design firms. So being able to even have some conversations beforehand to understand what the market is that you're going to ideally get a couple, 3 quotes at least that people are bidding on your project. Because I know right now sometimes it's just, can I get a contractor to even give us a quote? So the
Yeah.
other thing to look at from a constructability or construction perspective, and I think it's going to be really tough, but the earlier either if next year or the very end of this year that you could get that project actually out to bid. Contractors most of the time are bidding projects that may be 6 months out. So all of a sudden, if we're waiting till May to bid it of next year, you could be almost missing another construction season before that project may actually be able to be done. And you can stipulate whatever you want in your request for proposal, but if you're trying to keep it as cost effective as possible, you want to keep that in mind that you're going to be bidding at a time when it's attractive, when contractors are looking for work, because most of them have their construction season pretty well booked for the year. So they're going to be looking to fill the pipe for next year. So having something end of this year, very first of next would be ideal from being in the queue for contractors that will be looking for work. Keep that in mind. That's it. But it may, some of that may be your selection of your consultant of, who could put something together relatively quickly to be able to do that. But keep in mind, we would be talking about, it's more the the Chinworth Bridge one that would be the biggest push. So back to having 2 separate RFPs, I think it's going to be good to have 2 separate ones. Because it may, like I said, that may be different contractors or different consultants.
do you think we'll have any issues getting the master plan people on board this summer?
That would be probably, you guys have had a lot more conversations.
No, I would say, for the painting work, it's probably, not as common, I guess, that
Okay.
construction work to get something in. It usually, within the next few months, after they get on the bid, they usually have that coming, so.
Okay.
And hopefully there's enough firms that would be appropriate for this type of project, that we can get someone that can get started early on. That could be a criteria for your evaluation, is how quickly and what's the capacity to get that done in time as well, so.
But just keep in mind, the tighter the constraints you put on the consultant or the contractor on the timeline, either they won't bid or the price may go up.
Right.
They're gonna build that concern or that capacity, whether they have to pay their guys overtime or whatever it is to be able to complete the work if they're already at capacity.
Maybe, go ahead, Aggie.
So even if we just look at Chinworth alone, put the other one aside, even with Chinworth, is it a 2-step process? The first being kind of the engineering work, design engineering, and the second, the actual construction? Or
No,
would it,
I
would
think
it
that
be one?
I think that the Chinworth Bridge one, because I think 100% of that's gonna be constructed in county right of way, that I think that that one could go straight to a design to bid for contractor
Great.
phase, that it wouldn't have to go through a preliminary review or a, yeah, pretty much a preliminary design and then come back to an engineering firm to do that design. I think you could skip that first one and go straight into an engineering design would be what I would probably suggest. I mean, they probably could jump in.
Well, and I would say on that, typically you would have a bid for the engineering design of that work. And at the end of that, they'll come up with that final construction document, and then it gets rebid out for a construction firm. So there is a two-level kind of bidding process, for that, because your engineering firm most likely will be the construction firm. So there, usually that's the case.
Okay, and I'm not to be dense, but this isn't what I do. I'm hearing almost two different answers between,
Well, the difference is what he's saying is, I'm saying the preliminary is like the grand, kind of the pretty picture. Then you're gonna have an engineer that's actually gonna draw the detail.
Right.
But then you still have a contractor that actually
Builds.
paves builds the water, builds the pathway. So what he's saying is, lots of times the engineer firm will then, part of their fee is that management of that contract as far as putting it out for bid, helping with selection, doing the
Okay.
civils, all those types of things. So there is two phases of the design and the physical work that's done. So the other way, there's actually three. There's kind of the pretty picture plan, and then there's actual
Okay.
engineering, and then there's actual construction.
yeah, that helps a lot. So the master trail plan, that's the pretty picture.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Well, folks, maybe we can work backwards from when our scheduled meetings are, because we're certainly going to want to open up these bids at one of the scheduled meetings. It would appear to me, just looking at the calendar, that we'll either want to try to do that. I don't think we can get it done by August.
Probably
Maybe
September.
we can, but maybe September 21st would be the date that we schedule to open bids. And then we work backwards from there with all the other dates. Does that make sense to everybody?
Sure.
So we open, back to Word. Yes. Open 9/21. Gentlemen, how long do we, now, we're not even going to open them, so if we get them in on 9/14, that's more than enough, it would seem to me. Is that correct? If we, submission date like a week ahead of when we're going to open them, or just a couple days, or?
That is fine, yeah. And usually we pair the submit by date and date for those. So, then we usually have the bid, the out, or the RFP out for 30 days. Give people 30 days to get that, respond to that, with the pre-bid meeting happening near the front of that 30 days.
But if we go to the pre-bid meeting and we want to change the RFP, we have to republish, right?
Well, the pre-bid meeting with it, we've done those, where it's more of an opportunity for the firms to ask questions about the project, make clarifications, and then if there are revisions, we add that as an addendum to the RFP.
Okay.
And send that out to everyone with all the original meeting, the meeting and the distribution list.
Okay.
So that's why I would have that near the beginning, so like a week after you post that out, and you have that pre-bid meeting, and that gives you that time to respond to that. Maybe plan for that like 30 days or even 5 weeks for that bid opening time. And then that's probably a good amount of time for most of the work we've done. I think that the our commercial plan, I think it was that way as well, if I recall, but I think it was 4 weeks.
Yeah, date issued was October 14th and submission date was November 14th. So yes, it was out for 30 days.
Keep in mind, your time will start ticking, Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much all ARPA committee would of staggered. All those have to-
These are the dates that I've got.
Did you guys understand that then? So at the end of August 1st, unless for some reason the decision got tabled, the projects would be selected and the monies would be allocated to those projects on August 1st. So that would be kind of your date that you're free to fly, so to speak.
Right. So again, so that makes sense then. Our first real meeting where we'd have enough time to do this would be the 9/21 meeting then. That's about as, unless we schedule special meetings to do this, which we certainly can. I think the pre-bid meeting should be a special meeting.
And that doesn't have to be a public meeting, at
It-
least not normally. It's pretty much just it's more for the contractors or the consultants to have an opportunity to ask questions. So that one doesn't have to be a public meeting.
Okay.
I don't know that it ever is.
But you want it rescheduled and state that you are.
Right.
Should their questions be.
I mean, could you call it just like a bidders conference or something like that?
Yes, like that, yeah.
Okay.
So
It
every,
could be held, sorry, it could be held here in person, it could be through virtual, online, or a combination of the two. And again, just make sure you're explicit in the RFP of what the format is.
so if we get the RFP out, if we tell them it has to be submitted by 9/14, we promise to get it out by 8/14. So then we're looking roughly the end of August for that conference. Does everybody want to look at their calendars and see if we can't pick a date we think is going to work for that?
In August.
For the conference?
Yeah, I'm thinking that last week of August, starting the 28th. If that makes sense for everybody.
I know I'm traveling the 29th and 30th.
I could do the 28th. If Mike's got availability before he leaves.
But during the day I would, I'd have to probably travel that night.
Okay.
Well, there's no reason it has to be in the afternoon like we've been meeting for this. So does 8:28 work for everybody? Mike, would you rather do the morning?
Yeah, that would be more likely to be clear for me, yes.
Yeah.
And Ron and I can talk about where that's going to be. I don't think if it's a public meeting, it didn't have to be up here for that. Yeah. Okay, so then the dates then, again, just to repeat one more time, we're going to get the RFP on the street August 14th. We're going to have the pre-bid meeting on August 28th in the AM. Submissions will be due on September 14th, and we'll open them on our regularly scheduled meeting on 9/21. Is that what everybody else thought we said today?
Sounds good.
Will you send out a calendar invite?
Well, that's, my question is, I know that ARPA, I know we're all meeting and going to approve it on the 1st, but, it's kind of like, are you also going to have the RFP sitting there for the commissioners to approve that in the same meeting? Because won't the commissioners have to approve for something to go out for bid? Well, I guess that's what.
If the commissioners are at the August 1st meeting and approving this for ARPA, can that not be considered approval to move forward?
Well, I'm just trying to think through the process. It's kind of like we just approved the money, then you're spinning right around and then asking us to approve something. I mean, in some ways, I guess the only thing that I would say is there would need to have been some legwork done ahead of time. That
Right.
the commissioners and or the council wouldn't make well, we didn't have a choice to pick any other project. You already have RFPs sitting in front of us to approve. So I
Right.
think just try not to feel like we've already predestined the destination, even though
But-
the list of projects that are on the SIP is pretty small.
But you're approving that on August 1st, right?
We're approving the dollars to be spent on that project. What we're not approving then is the whole RFP request, which, I mean,
Okay.
I could argue it either way. I'm just trying to be sensitive to the fact that the group, we're bringing the group along and everybody has a chance to breathe and take in what information they've just done versus, okay, you said yes to this, then I need to say yes to this. I mean, it's just like I think waiting another 2 weeks would give everybody a chance to breathe and walk through. And then if there was some sort of question or other thing we needed to do, or how the money's got allocated up, maybe it's the extent of the Chenworth project that is gonna be further out because they have selected 2 projects. There's a few things there that I don't know that we can have. I think there's gonna need to be some decisions that are gonna be made at that meeting that I don't think we can have every scenario
Yeah.
all laid out for them to be able to take care of all that business at one time, because I think it would only be the commissioners that would need to approve.
So,
That could be done in all languages, the next meeting would be August 15th, so that could be when the RFP comes to the commissioners.
so we can certainly bring the draft RFP to you whenever you desire, understanding that we won't have a final RFP until we have that pre-bid meeting in case we make changes. Maybe working backwards from our meeting
No,
isn't the correct
no,
thing.
No, I'm seeing some head shake no.
Nope.
I was saying that, pre-bid meeting, you already have the RFP out, that one is just for answering questions.
Maybe I said it wrong. No. So what I'm saying is, why don't you, Carrie, tell us when you want us to come request permission for this, and we'll work from there forward. And whatever meeting of ours that falls into, or we've had the special meeting is the way to do it.
Marcia, what's your thoughts?
I think it's a little too much.
I
I
just
do too.
think that I'm not saying that we've got.
Because they can change the dollar amount, which will change the RFP.
Consensus.
Okay.
And I think making sure that we're giving everybody a chance to have a chance to think through the process. That I think getting the monies approved on the 1st, but I think then coming back to the commissioners on the 15th for the approval to send the RFP out for bid, I think would be the most prudent measure for the commissioner.
Well, that's okay. Just put it on the 16th, the 16th to go out.
So that means we meet with you on August 15th. So the only change we have to make to our schedule is that the RFP wouldn't then go out to August the 15th and only if approved on the 15th.
Yeah, go to the
August,
16th.
okay, I'm sorry if I'm screwing up the dates.
Yeah.
I know what I'm trying to say.
The next day.
Yeah. So this will all be tentative based upon commissioner's approval on August 15th.
And
Yeah.
And it has to feel comfortable. I think there's a lot to be said about the way that we kind of drive this thing and that we give everybody an opportunity to catch their breath and understand the decisions that we're trying to
I
ask.
just don't want the other commissioners or council people to feel like, they've kind of been headed down a path that they really didn't have a choice to make, that there's still opportunity for them to voice their concerns, and if there's changes that need to be made or tweaks, that it's not like, okay, we're still reeling from this decision and we're right into the next one. So I just think if we could build consensus with a little more time, that would be appreciated.
Well, I think that gives us a roadmap.
Does that change the later dates? It doesn't. It's just that timing. Okay.
Yeah, the only date that we didn't change is the RFP out to the bidders went from 8/14 to 8/16, and
Yeah.
only if approved.
Right.
Right.
But it didn't change the subsequent dates because there's still timing. in there.
We
So it's-
moved it 2 days. It's not going to be, I don't.
Yeah, still no.
But it, yeah.
Is the 14th is your day or 13th? What's your meeting?
That was completely arbitrary. Our meeting's the 21st, so we could move the submit date back, because I put it a week ahead of the meeting, so there's no reason we couldn't push that back, because we're not going to open them until the meeting. We can create more space.
I'm just wondering whether or not, Ron, does the Park and Rec Board need to vote on a recommendation that goes to the commissioners for the RFP? It's like, who's on first and who's on second?
What do you think that the commissioners are going to want? Do you want the actual draft RFP, or do you want us to come say, here's what's going to be in the RFP, we don't have it completely done yet?
Well, I know that legal's gonna wanna look at it. They're gonna
Okay.
look at the RFP and make sure
Okay.
More time to look at that would be good. But I think we're gonna wanna, historically, we would have an actual copy of the document that, you know, is gonna be sent out. And, you know, I think it'd be good for, you know, one or two of you to present that to the commissioners and what we're accomplishing here and
Well,
what our end goal is.
why don't we do this?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's leave all these dates as we have them. It's not going to be hard to change a couple lines on a document to change these dates if the commissioners want us to do something a little bit different. But that means we can approve, we can internally make a recommendation to the commissioners at the meeting in July to take this to them. That gives us time to publish it, if you will, to the commissioners. So they had a chance, and legal's had a chance to do it, and then we'll bring it for approval in the August meeting. Does that make sense? I know that there had been discussion at the last meeting when I went here about trying to sit down one-on-one with some of the players, and I think that's a good way to do it. We'll have the RFP.
If you already had that rough draft or some of that, even when you're having those conversations, I think it's all just more information. And I think if you can do that on a personal basis, that's gonna go a lot further than just send them an email and hoping it
Okay.
gets looked at.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So again, maybe the rest of you have this all figured out. So with the HELP funds, I know council and commissioners approve how those dollars will get allocated. But for the RFP process, we've been talking about the commissioner's role.
Right, because once the monies are appropriated, then the council is out.
Okay, so council doesn't have a role on the language of the RFP.
No,
Okay.
that's all the executive branch's
Okay,
responsibilities as commissioner. So once those funds are appropriated through the council, then that's when, from there on, so like even correct me if I'm wrong, Marcia, but even once they would come to the commissioners, so once the bids come in, you would come back to the commissioners again for a recommendation of approval for that contract. Again, it would only be the commissioners that would need to see that
Okay.
contract. Because the monies have been set aside, they've established that fund, those dollars, so now it's up to you five and the commissioners to kind of move the ball from there, as long as there's no additional funding that's needed.
thank you.
Rob, do we need to continue to work the timeline backwards so that like we can say that we've agreed on what we think the RFP needs to contain, when we think that we're gonna be able to send it out?
So we can also identify decisions that might need to be made today,
Yeah, exactly.
kind of working all the way back, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So July 20th is when we'd want to preliminarily approve what we think is in the RFP?
That's our July meeting date? Yes, I think that's our plan is to approve the draft on that day.
Now, but keep in mind, things could shift when council and commissioners allocate the
yep.
funds. Yeah.
Right.
And I would suggest you guys don't go on back, I think what you're saying then is, okay, the bids are then gonna come in 30 days past that date, and then you're gonna need time so you're gonna open those bids, and you're gonna need time to make a recommendation, come back to the commissioner, so when will the consultant actually be given the green light to start? Because I think you're gonna, in that RFP process, you're gonna wanna know, okay, we're assuming this would be awarded in the next 30 or 60 days, and then once you're awarded, how long is it gonna take you to do your design and or master plan? Because I think you're gonna want some dates out there where it's not just, you know, you finish it when you finish it.
Right.
You're gonna want to be working all the way back through, so I mean, I think some of those durations are gonna be stuff that MACOG can definitely help with. And I think as you even go through some of that pre-bid meeting with those consultants, if they're like, dude, there's no way I can do this in 60 days, what you got on this piece of paper. It needs to be 90 or whatever it is. I mean, those are the types of things that can be done by addendum once you have the interested bidders in front of you at a pre-bid.
So continuing to work the other way a little bit, if you open them on 9/21, they then have to be scored and our recommendation, and then brought back to the commissioners. So what what meeting, date do you think is going to work?
If you do have a recommendation from your 9/21 meeting, we can put you on the agenda for the 9/26 commissioners meeting, which is the following week.
So,
We need more time than that, because if it's going out to bid on what date?
well, we were talking about going out to bid on 8/16, opening them then on 9/21. So,
8/16 to 9/21? Okay.
Yeah, that, because then you'll have time to review it before you make recommendations, but that is opening.
right, so we're going to need more time than,
Then make recommendation. The question there would be, you need to come back, I guess we need to come back together and agree.
that's what I would think. I don't think we want to make a call without spending some quality time with these.
Lots
So,
of times, there's even an interviewing process. You know, let's say there's 5 firms that bid, you may pick 2 or 3 of the top ones and actually have a face-to-face. Or even part of the RFP can be, they gotta do a presentation to the board. It's not just a piece of paper of,
Yeah.
here's who we are and here's what I'll do for this number of dollars.
And, yeah, to that point, I can't remember on the ones we shared with you, but on other RFPs we've done, we have added then dates for interviews, so we will shortlist some
Right.
of those firms and say, okay, well, these ones we like the best. We want to interview them on this day. There's a way to have it on everyone's calendar. And then after that, you'll then make your final decision of which ones you want. But we've done that in the past, done interviews as part of that evaluation process.
so would you recommend we open them, everybody needs a chance to review them? Does it make sense to have a work meeting to decide what we want to do and then decide if we want to bring people in, or is that too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question there would be whether you individually could review and then make a time shortlist. I mean, I don't know if you need to get together to make a
Well, how's that going to work with open meetings if we?
on that end, if that works. Because otherwise, yes, we would want to get together, decide on a short list of who would be interviewed, and then get back together and interview, and then decide. So, there's a lot of little steps in there to do.
Marcia, I'm just trying to work through some of the other things that I've been part of. I think as long as you're not making the final selection, I think you can make the short list, and reduce that down to a number in a non-public meeting. I'm pretty sure that you're not making final selection. Plus, it is a service. So, I mean, that removes some of the hard number scenarios as far as low bid and some of that stuff. So I think you could, and Marcia or Rhonda, you could check and confirm, but I think that if you could shorten that list down to whoever you want to interview, because I would really highly recommend that you do some sort of an interview process before you make a final selection, because somebody can look really good on paper, and when they give you the presentation, you know, they can bomb it or look like a rock star. I mean, so I just think making sure you see what they can do in front of people, because, you know, this is gonna be another process like what we just walked through with this master plan, that there's gonna need to be public outreach and engagement and things along the way. So you wanna make sure you selected the right consultant to help you walk through that process.
So if that's being the case, I think we should look at a special meeting like the first week of October. Like to hear from you guys whether you want that to be just us, or we want to try to narrow it down and actually do some invites. That's going to be really tough to invite somebody in if we've given them like 5 or 6 days' notice.
But
But
you know, I
there's-
think what Gary was saying was
Yeah.
one opportunity would be as part of the RFP process, they come in and present. And then I think the week or two before the special meeting, we have time to digest it, discuss, you know, learn more about these, and you know, individual contractors, and then we have the meeting.
Yeah, or another way is, what is included in the RFP is, this is the date that interviews will happen. You will know, you will be notified a few days in advance if you're selected for an interview. So we're not, it's not such short notice, but that way we're not meeting with a firm that we feel is,
Just awareness that,
Yeah.
that there's a secondary step.
Good idea.
So we got at least one vendor here. Does any of this make sense to you?
Zach, as far as, I mean, from a perspective on some of these that you put out, I mean, what, realistically, is this three? I mean, what do you think we're probably gonna get? As far as kind of,
Oh, yeah, so
results, we'll take a look at it.
I would say, so for the Alberta Negotiation Fund, I mean, I think we had 5 firms, if I remember right, which included a couple national, right, firms on their staff as local, there, which we would probably act with. So because of that, you can definitely get several, like, I think 5, 6 there. We just did a transit plan, I think, and we had, 5 vendors for that one applying, we narrowed that down to, 3 to interview, there, and then decided on one, for example. So I think, there's a good chance that you'll have more than 3, people applying for this. So, because in addition to the couple national firms that are known for bicycle planning, there are a lot of local firms
Yeah.
that would probably be interested in this as well, so.
How big do these proposals come back? Are these 300 pages, or are they?
No, so that's part of, when you develop an RFP, is, I mean, you can, what we've done in the past is we've done like, fill out this form of some basic information and then supply this other information, and you can kind of limit that to a certain number of pages, there. Some come back, trying to think of, it depends on the request, but I would imagine this is not going to be a 300-page response, but you can have like a form there, say, I want to know this information, like,
Okay.
past experience, what have you done in public engagement, or some of these elements where you're asking specific questions. And then you can say, you provide, like sample material that you've done for plans, and so that they might supply a large attachment because of that. But
Okay.
those are kind of additional information, so, but yeah, they definitely range in the size from, 30 pages to 300 pages, depending on what we're talking about, but, I would imagine this would be the 300 range, so.
Okay, so it's going to be multiple hours per vendor.
So, that's, again, sometimes, I would get at that, some which had like 6 or 8 firms apply, that would be through, but hopefully, I don't know, to that level, but
So,
I would guess.
board, we think we can knock this out in 2 weeks to have our next meeting, to have all those pre-reviewed, ready to discuss? Okay, so let's look at a special meeting or a work meeting then the first week of October. Does anybody have dates that work, don't work?
I'm wide open.
Yeah. Also, I know September, was it?
It looks fairly good.
Labor Day is the 4th, so after that, I mean,
In September,
Hold-
though.
Well, October.
yeah, I'm good, whatever.
Why don't we schedule for October 4th at 1 for this?
So just thinking ahead, so the commissioners' meeting is the Tuesday after, is there a
October 10th.
October 10th?
Okay,
Would we have anything for them at that
we
point?
might.
Okay,
I mean, so if we do interviews and then, I don't see any reason we couldn't also schedule tentatively a vote that day. If we're ready to vote, we do. If we need more time,
Okay.
then we pass and we go to the next commissioners meeting if we have to.
okay.
Okay. That'll be good.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a special meeting. Sure.
Yes.
1 o'clock.
yeah, if we can. Okay.
Now,
If that's a work meeting and we don't have to make it a public meeting though, we don't, I would rather that be public. If we're going to interview these people, I think it would be better to be public. I sort of like the idea of the multi-purpose room. If we have 6 or 7 vendors and they each bring 3 or 4 people,
Good thinking. I like that. That's a good idea.
All right, so 1 PM then. All right.
do we need to do anything else with dates and that kind of stuff? I mean, we spent a long time, but I'm not surprised. It's something we've never done before.
it's It's great having.
Yes,
everybody here
thank you
that's here.
for
Thank
being
you.
here to help us.
Yes.
So I would say though, working backwards even to today, right?
Okay.
We talked about having a draft approval, probably 90% done-ish on July 20th. And we have our next meeting on June 20th, so we're only 6 weeks away-ish from that.
Right, boy, that's right.
We have a reputation for getting things done quickly, so we'll try to maintain that. Yeah.
So do you see anything in particular we need to schedule between now and then?
No, I just think we have to, well, I don't know yet. I think we have to figure out exactly kind of what we're putting into it and what needs to get done, and then making sure, you know, we time that correctly.
Have you all seen the request that they sent out for Goshen and those? Did you all
I
get
did
that?
not.
I
No.
don't think I
Okay.
got it.
No,
Well, I'll get that out to everybody today.
so I think it was Rob and I that both indicated June 15th, we would not be here.
Correct. Is everybody else here June 15th?
No, I am not here on,
Okay.
Okay, so we'll need to reschedule.
Next Thursday is, not next Thursday, right? It's a week from
Yeah,
Thursday.
our next meeting is scheduled, the 15th is next Thursday, but yeah.
Yeah. So, you're not here either, Mike? Okay, so that meeting is then off. There's no way to have a quorum for that meeting. So do we want to call another meeting later in the month? Okay.
Now, you're welcome to meet without me, but to let you know, I'm gone through the 23rd. As of the 26th, I'm back and pretty open.
I'm gonna be in Oregon, the 19th to the 23rd as well.
How does everybody look on the 29th?
I'm wide open.
Me too. Yep.
Okay, let's go,
Rhonda?
if we can.
I'll check to make sure the room is available, so tentatively we'll get that.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. And we're aiming for the 29th.
And,
Got my timeline all out of.
yeah. And July 20th? Does that work for everybody? It works for me.
currently, yes.
Yeah, I've got it on my calendar already.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good.
And we'll be able to identify by that time if we, even before then, maybe if we need another meeting in between just to finalize what we need to have by the 1st.
Hey, yeah.
Can you repeat the timeline for the RFP? There were a lot of dates around there. I want to make sure I got them correct.
Well, I'd be careful putting any dates in because there's a lot of moving parts. So this is all very, very tentative. I think the key now is our next meeting is going to be June 29th. I think that we'll all charge each other with going through the draft plans MAGCOG has presented in terms of roughing out the draft plan. Then July 20th, the idea is the Parks Board will approve the draft plan and make a recommendation to the commissioners that they accept our draft plan.
Contingent on approval of the funds on August 1st, right? Because this is being drafted for actually presentation on the 15th of August.
Right,
So,
because this is not all approved by the county yet. We're trying to get ahead of the game a little bit. And then we'll meet with the commissioners at their meeting on August 15th and formally present to them. I would think any other date after that, I wouldn't publish yet, because I think it's all just too tentative. Is that fair enough? I think you certainly would be fair to say we plan on having the RFP on this street before the year is out, presuming all the money's approved.
Okay, so we've been talking about what we called the first RFP that relates to the Chinworth extension. And then there's also, we hope, the master plan, the Blueway Greenway master plan. Now, do we want, and that, this would be a separate RFP, do we want to be moving both forward on the same timeline? Do we want to?
And that's a great point.
I would think so.
I would
becau-
think
I
so.
would say, because, well, any of the projects that are approved out of August 1st, there's the third one as well as,
Yeah, there's
Lake
the
James,
potential of the James Lake
right? So I
Paddler
think, I mean, I
launch.
would think that, based on our discussion, that we would want to pursue them in parallel.
So let's call it the master RFP and the Chinworth RFP, just to keep them
Yeah.
straight between us.
But there is a Lake James one as well.
Yeah, do we want to move that fast on the Lake James, Carrie?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that if there's a project on the SIP that, there again, one vote, so, but the SIP, I would say that's probably the least likely of the three projects to get approved currently. Just, I think the momentum is behind the other two.
That's fine.
I think there's also for us very, very much of a lessons learned. We don't try to do everything at once, that we're going to learn there are some things we want to do. And we're proceeding at a pace that is very fast, but let's not move any faster than we.
That's fine.
I think what Aggie's suggesting is good, because,
Yeah.
as Carrie said, it takes a while for stuff to happen. We don't want this to be pushed off for like 5 years down the road. We gotta just get it moving.
But from what I think, again, what I just heard, yes, I think we, and kind of the question is, I think we should be prepared to push forward both RFPs.
Yeah.
On the same timeline.
I think so.
Hey, Bob, you guys have a problem with both those?
I think that makes sense. Again, and it's gonna be getting that, both those things ready at the same time.
Yeah.
Well-
Like, either maximize your time together possibly, so.
Yeah. The one nice thing about doing those together is we really are going to learn a lot more about the actual design build plan as we're doing the master plan to make sure that we really understand what we want in both.
I mean, they may separate as we get into a little more detail on those dates, but,
Right.
but for
Yeah.
right now, I
Right.
would think we try to plan it together.
Yeah. Can I make a comment on the James Lake Paddler launch? And I, with help from others of you, I worked on that proposal. And we were particularly looking for something that might be eligible for CDBG funds. We do not have a specific site identified with, that we know would be easy access to a public road and a landowner that would want to sell us property. And it's my opinion that it's, if we're not using CDBG funds for it, it wouldn't be my first priority for a paddler launch to add to what our county
think that's
already
fair.
has.
That's
100%
interesting.
agree with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I just want to, because I was kind of, I've done some work on it. I'm not saying the rest of you haven't, but I just wanted to let people know, it's, like, if we had more money and we made the Chinworth extension longer, I think it might be a better public benefit.
Right.
I agree with you. What I was thinking about that is if we have some money that we have to spend, that'd be a good place, but otherwise, there are other places, Grassy Creek Launch would be an alternative.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that brings up, right, it's a I agree with what you're saying. I think as we went, we thought it was an opportunity. And since then, we've been able to explore it further. It's less of a priority for us. I would just then ask the question, it is on the docket to be presented on August 1st. I'm not sure. Should it be on that docket? Should we deprioritize it? I don't want to prep to present it unless it makes sense to still present it. That's just kind of my open question.
I think all the projects that are in the SIP need to be presented.
Okay.
Let the council, commissioner probably kind of sort the fodder out, so to speak. But I think the other thing is I know that we may have other projects now that have come to light that we maybe wish were on the SIP, but Okra, me and Amy were just on a meeting last week with the Okra specific about those ARPA funds that we earmarked for help have to be used on projects that are in the SIP. We can't add to it.
Oh, gosh.
So we can't be adding more projects
Right.
into the SIP after it's already been approved by OKRA and by the commissioners and the council and all that. So it's gotta be spent on those projects that are already in there. So whether or not, now the nice thing about the Chenworth extension, it didn't specify whether they went all the way to Atwood or went all the way to Greenwood or whether it stopped at,
Right.
the trailer park, or whatever. So there's definitely some flexibility in shortening or lengthening. Now, and we don't have to do a income study any longer, so we won't need to specify a particular area, whereas that would have been the other limiting factor of how far that project could have been if it was CDG funds, if all of a sudden you went further out and the income came up and then
That's
it didn't meet the criteria. Well, those aren't parameters we have to worry about. So that project is nice in the fact that, whatever we think we have for money, we can stretch it as long or shorten it as much as we need to use up those funds if need be. Now, granted, there are a couple broadband projects that are gonna be presented as well, so, I think that there's gonna be an allocation of those funds, not just all going to those two projects.
So I have a follow-up question on the draft. Who's prepping the draft?
So my suggestion would be, and I'll send this out, we have a draft done by MACOG that I
Okay.
can send out to everybody. I don't remember, Donnie, did you send that to me in Word? Okay. If,
I will also note that that does not include the component to that thing. That was just a language. So
okay,
you need to add that language in if you're still looking to do a planning as part of this whole package.
and do you guys have draft language?
I know, I've been trying to find, I haven't found one that includes that specifically. I had some examples of plans not in our opinion, so I'm still searching, and I'm asking around now, so.
Yeah, so I can throw this into the Microsoft OneDrive, and that way everybody can comment and edit.
All right, so, and that's fine, I just wanted to clarify, we as a board will be prepping this?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Any other discussion of the RFP then?
Both RFPs.
Both RFPs, yes. Then let's move on to other stuff. Aggie had a couple people who wanted us to come talk, and I said, well, let's talk about that as a group and decide how we want to handle those requests.
Okay.
I think it's important that we have one voice, and that may mean one PowerPoint slide deck we all use regardless of who's presenting. So Aggie, why don't you talk about who
Sure.
wants us to come?
Okay, so the first request that has come to me, and I've mentioned this to Rob, but I clarified some of the details this week. It's the Clean Water Partnership. So it's an organization that is focused on our local lakes and river, and it includes the Watershed Foundation, the Lilly Center for Lakes and Streams, the city engineering and wastewater, and I think some county, and I can't tell you who all is involved in it, but it's very much a focus, not on the whole county, but on the Tippy River watershed area. And they,
Clearwater?
yeah, the Clearwater Partnership.
Okay.
They would be interested in having us join their meeting on July the 10th. The meeting starts at 8:30. They figured that their group is generally 8 to 10 people. Now, I don't know if the week after the 4th of July, they get that regular attendance or not. And the meeting is at the chamber, and usually Rob Parker participates in those meetings. Diane Quantz, who was on our steering committee and of course is on the Warsaw Common Council is usually at those meetings. So those are some folks that we know pretty well.
So this is a request from them for us to present too?
Yeah.
Okay.
About 30 minutes. They said, a couple of slides would be great. And I think that they're interested in what it is that we're
Yep.
looking at moving forward with. They also include some folks that can be great allies in having some very shared goals that can sometimes help us figure out how to do things or who to partner with to get information. So that's one. The second one is the Breakfast Optimist.
Yep.
Okay. The Breakfast Optimist Group, and they are interested in October or later, a program from us.
I did have a separate discussion with Sherry
Sherry?
Benyuski on that, and we had talked about possibly late November, because I
Okay.
thought it made sense potentially to get through some of this RFP process to give a more
Yeah.
clear update in terms of
Right.
what specifically is going on. Now, with that said, that Sherry requested for the next cycle of Optimist Club. I just had a request from Jeff Owens for the current cycle, potentially in September, but I think we'll just identify maybe the November date makes sense.
Yeah,
If
I
that
think-
makes the
I
most
think
sense.
her program responsibility starts in October.
It
so-
does, yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
we do, we need to make sure we're speaking on one voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that we're not saying different things
Yeah.
when we're speaking to different groups. So I do think a master PowerPoint or something that we can talk through. So we
But
don't
that-
overpromise or
I agree, sorry to interrupt. I agree completely, and I think there's, I had put in my last notes, and there's been a request to get a little, even a kind of a document from us on kind of currently the benefits of what what we're creating to the community as we've talked about needing to meet with individual commissioners and council members, we need to pull that together. So again, I think it is representative of what we're doing on the board. And so it is, same, it's the consistent message. So there's a piece of that, I think, just for one-on-one discussions, but then build off that to become more of a general presentation we may use at these different events.
So I know that Mike spent a lot of his career doing PowerPoints and presenting PowerPoints. So I would really prefer that Mike take the lead on assembling the PowerPoints. It doesn't mean he'll present every time it's done, but at least putting it together, I know he is great at that. I will send to all of you the PowerPoint that I did for, is it Rotary I spoke at? Which was, I guess, sort of more economic development oriented than anything else. And even though Clean Water may be a slightly different group, I still think that same presentation
Yeah. Oh, I
would
think,
be
yeah.
fine for that.
It'll be the Q&A that differs.
Right.
And I think, yeah, Carrie had a comment here.
Then, Rob, I remember I sent you an email, I don't know, it's been a month or so ago, that August 15th, that they wanted, at the CAC, the foundation, over lunch, they'd like to have a little presentation on parks and trails. So that was August 15th at 11:30.
I'm sorry, Gary, I must have missed that one.
Oh,
I
you,
am.
you answered it, it was,
Did I?
Did you say Mike would take care of it?
yeah,
I'm a little worried
you
on
know, he
this one.
volunteered himself. It was May 3rd when it came through.
Uh,
Because you sent me that PowerPoint that you just talked about.
They have rescheduled my state child support conference to that date now.
Okay.
I don't know if that's going to occur or not, but that's a discussion far outside this meeting.
Right.
Mike, can you potentially put that on your
Okay,
calendar?
yeah.
And this is a very laid-back meeting, but whether or not we have something, the other thing, talking about the different things as we talk with people, I know some of the stuff that I've been involved with, if you can come up with a one-page or a most two-page, so front and back sheet of paper that kind of has your talking points and your mission statement and your things on it that you can leave them when you're done, that kind of gives them a highlight of what you're trying to do and create is just helpful versus, a whole stack of stuff, because most
Yeah.
people aren't gonna keep it, keep it simple. So I mean, if it's only one page, great, but worst case, front and back of one page. So having that type of information to be able, even when you sit down and meet with commissioners or council, that you could leave with them would be,
I think, yeah, it makes total sense to keep it in one page and even if possible, 3 to 5 high-level talking points. Just helps.
I think it'd be awesome if we had as many of our members at each one of these sessions as is feasible. But I think that also means potentially going back to them and saying, it's not just going to be the speaker. Can we bring 3 of the other ones want to attend? Like Breakfast Optimist supplies breakfast, so they need to know how many people are going to be there.
Now,
But I think that shows a real
Yeah.
commitment by our board.
if we have 3 or more of us, is that a problem in terms of public meetings?
I don't think in that context it would be if we're
Okay.
going to another group and one of us is presenting. We're clearly not conducting any business there.
Probably no different than our public input meetings. Those weren't decision-making,
Right.
right? Those were just,
I think it's clearly something we don't want to go huddle up in a separate room and talk for 10 minutes and come out together. That would be bad. But Breakfast Optimists, if they still do it this way at Creighton, if there's 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 different tables, everybody takes a different table, we can be pretty useful in getting our word out. In terms of those dates, then let's just try to get them set and get the word out to everybody, what the dates are, and we'll see who can cover.
yep.
Anything else for today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Playing into
Gosh.
talking, speaking in one voice. One of the things that can really help do that is have a logo and colors. That's a very starting point for like even your PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
You got to think about that. So Rhonda, I emailed you. Could you show that on the screen by chance?
No.
Was that?
No, I can't.
It's a PDF.
No.
Just, can you email it to us? I mean,
It's what I emailed last week to the board, and I can pull it up on my iPad for people to see. I am going to say, though, that, so Matt and I took the charge to meet with graphic designers. We gave them some initial inspiration and comments about what we would want as a County Parks and Recreation Board logo. Try to keep it simple, but we wanted it representative of Kosciuszko County and what we do. So we actually started with 3 options, narrowed it down to 2, and those were the 2 I shared with the board and we can talk about today. I will ask, though, the logo kind of piece of this, this discussion always scares me in larger groups, and especially when decisions haven't been made. So I'd like to, I'm cautious about sharing this out too publicly at this point, just because it's not a final decision. And honestly, I think it'd be appropriate for us as a board to discuss what we see. If we like one of the 2, that we have a recommendation. But then I think our next step would be then to, at least at a minimum, talk to the county commissioners individually as we have these other discussions and discuss the direction we're going and why, to make sure that we have their alignment as well before we move further.
And I think on this issue, council as well.
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
Yeah. So you're not asking for a decision today?
I would,
But
ideally,
input.
I would like to have a recommendation from this board on which one and why. Now, with that said, if neither one of these are working for any reason, we can go back to the drawing board. But ideally, if we could have a recommendation coming out, that then it's an easier discussion of, we had options, we chose this. Can you just keep it on that one for right now? But I'll ask you to scroll in a minute. So yeah, that's the intent, is if we have an approval, great. So again, we have 2 options to present today. Both of them, do highlight Kosciuszko Parks and Recreation. This first one that you see is more of a shield design. It's representative, I think, of many things of our area and what we're trying to do. Certainly, blueways are represented in there. A greenway type path is represented. Nice, beautiful, we'll call it a sunset or a sunrise over Indiana Fields, I think is captured as well. I think the obvious colors that you might go with in these designs are blue and green, but I think this one's a little more striking with the orange as well. So this is one option. They did We did have an early iteration that they tried to put a lake in it as well, which is very representative of the county, but realistically, you can try to do too much in a simplified logo, and it really wasn't working. If you scroll up just a little bit, scroll down, yeah, to this. The other piece that we were also trying to find a design that would work well in black and white, because you just need, it's good to consider these things, because a lot of times it may be photocopied, or you may have a usage where it's just black and white, and you want to make sure it's still working in that style.
And what you'll notice too is that it works either in stacked, like it is there.
Just turning on your mic.
Oh, it also works as stacked or side with the shield to the left. So it will play nicely either way.
So you can then scroll down further, and you just see different applications. Business cards, letterhead, could potentially be on signs, identifying the trails. What you're seeing here may not be all iterations. This is typical graphic designers show kind of different applications of it. So that's the first design, and there's a sign and flags with it. And if you scroll a little further, we'll get into the second design, just a little bit more. So this one's actually quite a bit simpler. It does use the green and the blue, has a bit of an organic shape to it, but also implements the K as part of the design, and using the K to represent either greenways or blueways. Has the open green spaces, has kind of the open blue as well, which could be interpreted as either a lake or a launch site, or something like that on one of the streams or the tippy. And if you scroll down, again, it's just similar treatments. What does it look like in black and white? What does it look like if you continue down, just in different applications as well? And so kind of, open discussion on whether there's a preference from the board. And I would open it up to the entire group too.
Keep going down just a little bit more, they'll have both
Yeah.
options. Keep going.
I would open it up to the broader group, because it's quite possible we're reading on someone else's logo that looks very similar in a nearby area. I don't think we're infringing on anything obvious with like Nike or Honda or anything like that, but it's always a watch out when you're doing logo designs as well. And if I'm kind of curious too, if anyone thinks we're missing the beat here, let us know.
In an email
Yep.
that I was copied on, you were asking if anyone felt that perhaps there was a problem with other logos. Did you get any response
I
to
did not.
that question?
I did not.
Okay.
There shouldn't be, because it was a hand design, so it shouldn't be like, it wasn't copied and pasted and edited slightly. It's-
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know though,
Yeah.
that,
And Matt, was this done by some of your students?
Mhm.
Yeah,
well, it's
pretty cool.
actually, it's through, was it just
Yeah,
students?
student and with oversight by a lead
Yeah.
graphic designer.
Oh, good. I've been through lots of these kind of processes, and I am really impressed with the two designs that you came up with, how good they both are.
Thanks.
And I would even say they're just variants on the first thoughts too. So there's a third option. I don't even remember what it looks like, that I think we kicked out pretty quickly. But yeah, any comments, any preferences?
Anybody in the audience want to speak up?
I would agree with Aggie, that I think both of those look really good. I guess I'm trying to think of, the blue and the green, I guess maybe speaks more to what I was talking about, greenways and blueways. I understand that yellow does catch your eye. What is Lines? I'm trying to think which one has the setting sun as part of their, you know what I'm talking about?
The Optimus uses it for some of their logos, but not like that.
I mean, I think this is great. I mean, I would love to be able to get to the point where, we have logos and whether there's advertising from billboards or whatever else that we would get into, it's just kind of like clear outside of what our county normally is like, but, and I think, where are we at with the clearly Kosciuszko? Who has the rights over that? Is that the chamber now?
Oh, with the visit, with that K? Yeah, that has a different stylized K to it. That would be, I mean, we didn't go down that route. If we wanted to build off that, we could do something like the logo on the left with that, but I think we'd just have to, it'd be a revisit with the graphic
only thing
design.
that I can see, I just look at how successful Michigan has been in their pure
Yeah.
Michigan advertising. I mean, that's over the whole state. I mean, you say purely Michigan, everybody knows what you're talking about. I know we're talking about Kosciuszko County, not the whole state, so. But I think just that message that continues to, define unity in the whole county is what I'm looking for. I think either one of these would definitely do that as well, so I'm not saying that we would have that road, but I think that the chamber does have the rights to that. Clearly, Kosciuszko, now, there used to be Lily's Lakes and Streams, I think is where it initiated.
Well, we could talk to them about permission to use that. So even like on letterhead, that could be potentially the footer. So more of a tagline than the logo.
Because I see that as a tag, more like you're right, more of a tagline of put them in Kosciuszko. That might be a good idea.
So board, any comments on this?
I like them both. The first one with the orange, I first thought of Manchester University in there, so in my mind, I kind of picked up a little bit of that. And also too, I think it's really good timing to bring these things about, but I think that there's also a time where you want to let something like this bake, because I've been involved with logos too. And I mean, when we talk about the Ride Walk Committee here in town, we brought out logos early on, and 3 years later, changing logos, and before we knew it, we had 3 or 4 different logos. So I think that if there's anything that we can do to leverage from, statewide programs that cascade down into our into our local area, there's always that pride to authorship, and we want to be able to bring something new to the table and kind of innovative, but sometimes there's a lot of value in trying to leverage and build off of things that are already in flight. And there is a clearly Kosciuszko sign that's on Highway 15 down here, so if you're interested in it, it's right across from Bixler Park where the pickleball courts are. So if you're heading south on 15, if you kind of look there, you'll see one of those clearly Kosciuszko logos there. So good stuff, though.
Zach, what's the, because there's some trail branding that's for the whole trail system up in St. Joe, Elkhart County, correct?
Yeah, so we have a trail brand for our regional trails from our 4 county areas. So that as our trail system develops, we would like to incorporate that in there. We have that,
Is it the Crossways Trail?
yeah,
Okay.
Crossway trails there. And we work, right now, we're working in South Bend, Central County, and integrating our logo as a kind of a sub-component to their branded trails. So again, so as you get to trail development, you're putting incorporating your colors and your brand in that we would be able to like compete or override that. That's something that we try to do that so we can continue to market.
There are two things that are important here. There was not a visceral dislike of them because as per normal, about 50% of people like, yuck, this is just horrible. So we didn't have that reaction. But also we do need to decide on it fairly soon so that we can start, when we start doing our slides, we start, this is like the anchor point, whatever it.
I do think, though, it's good discussion with the Crossways Trail, and we do want to be linked to that. However, this is for the Parks and Rec Board for Kosciuszko, and we're not the Crossways Trail organization, right, for what we're doing here. And what we're doing is not just trails. So, yeah, I think that's kind of just the bigger picture to think about, that we will need our own identity to a certain point. And yes, you're right, if we had this kind of agreed by July 10th, we can, that'd be great to have that in that, but I think we could we can let it bake a little bit if, till the 29th, have a further discussion on it. But I would like to have this, I think we absolutely want this clear by the time, certainly by the August 1st at the very latest, so it becomes consistent in what we're doing.
Well, one of my hopes was that if we were to move forward on one of those early projects, like Chinworth.
Yeah.
As soon as we put a sign up, this project is doing out in the dirt, we've got this logo ready to go.
So I'm going to recommend, I think the thought of let it percolate for another couple weeks, but let's have a couple of the discussions perhaps with commissioners and council meetings, council members as well, and bring, but I would really like to have, if we're going to go move forward with one of these, have that decided by the 29th.
So the only watch out I have there is if we want to have serious discussions with our partners after we finalize the RFP, but this is going to be decided before we have the RFP done. We don't want to go to the well too many times either.
What do you mean?
Well, if you want to go meet somebody and they're short on time.
Oh, yeah.
with one meeting for the logo, we need another meeting
got
for the RFP. I think
Yeah.
we need to make sure that maybe it'd be, maybe this is something we could do via email and say, this is to the commissioners and the council, these are the plans we're considering.
In individual conversations, I think we could show both, but I think in any kind of greater distribution of this, I'd rather have a recommendation from the board.
Can we flip-flop the colors on those? Or is that, have you guys, I'm just curious
Yeah.
how it would work if they went the other way.
Do you want to flip-flop them, or do you just want to see the green and blue on the right one?
That would work.
Yeah,
Green and blue on the right.
yeah.
Yeah.
It might be a different play with
So what color
blue
would the sky
skies.
be?
Blue skies and a blue stream with a white pathway going over. I would, that's my initial response.
Okay.
So, can you say that again, Mike?
Take the orange
white
of the
with
sky, make it blue, make the white stream blue, and make the orange pathway white.
There we go.
I was thinking we just replace all the orange with blue.
Possibly, but then your stream, well, possibly. We can play with the, I mean, that's a simple thing for them
Yeah.
to look at.
Yeah.
All right, so if we're gonna, I mean, that's a lean towards that logo. I mean, if we're gonna put more effort into
I like
that
the
logo.
logo. I like the shield because one of the things I'm very much thinking about is mile markers in the trail.
Yeah.
That shield is easy to duplicate to have mile markers along with. And that's a very great branding thing to every mile. there's
If you were
a
to just
Kosciuszko
cut out that
County Parks
shield.
and Rec logo.
It'll
As a-
stand by itself really nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we can look at that.
It seems that we should maybe engage the Convention and Visitors Bureau and clearly Kosciuszko folks, get ideas if they have any.
We can.
Yeah. It's
Um,
not that we're asking them to make the decision for us, but is there something that stands out to them as not working with other ways that we're branding and wanting to market?
We can
our
ask that
county?
question, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So who would,
that'd be Corey
the
Humes, I
Visitors
think.
Bureau?
Corey on that,
Yeah. So I think it's just going back to our steering committee.
yeah.
Well, that's not a bad idea. Why don't we send it out to the steering committee?
Or at least select members.
The
Yeah.
problem is it's getting unwieldy. I
Yeah.
can tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody and their
Doing this
uncle will
by
have an
committee is-
opinion and
yeah.
they'll just break down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just, it's
I
been
think
my
you've done it
experience
before,
too.
so.
I've done it a lot of times.
Well,
and,
let me reach out to
it's
Rob
just
Parker
better
at the
to-
chamber then about clearly Kosciuszko.
Yeah.
They'll be like,
If
I think if
somebody
we
starts
limit it-
designing
Corey
a,
at the Conventions Bureau, we've
multiple
got both
hump.
of them covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my first response, I'm looking at the Visit Kosciuszko, the K stylized wasn't really gonna work in this, but I think it's it's a question that, you know, those could be used in the same places.
Yeah.
So are they complementary or not?
Yeah. That'll be fun to see in blue and green, the one on the right. Yeah.
You gotta get going. Well, do we have anything else then?
I think the only other final thing was we did talk about meeting with council members and commissioners to, I mean, we need a one pager, I think, before we do that,
Yeah.
perhaps, but, and we can divide maybe that up by email, but we need to start thinking about and doing that, having those meetings.
And it's not only related to RFP, you know.
Oh, no,
as Carrie
it's-
pointed out, it's only the commissioners that the RFP
Yeah.
pertains to, and then it's only the specific pot of money there. But our master plan is a much bigger plan. And I just want to make sure that council members and all of the commissioners have an understanding of what our vision is and our goals for the next 5 years, so that when we come back to them asking for approval along the way, that they feel like they've known that this is the direction we're taking. They may have ideas to help us move some things forward or connections that we should be making, or we can hear questions that they have so that we're planning
Yep.
to be able to answer those.
Are there anybody, I mean, Carrie, Rhonda, Marcia, are there others besides the council members and commissioners that you'd recommend that we speak with?
The only one I can think of is Steve out of Pac-Man. Just from a perspective, the county highway department at some point is probably gonna be the one maintaining whatever we create.
What name did you say?
County highway.
Steve Morari, he's the highway superintendent. Just, I think, keeping him in the loop, that he knows what's going on and what that might look like. And, because I think, having him on our team is gonna, because there's some of the funding that is maybe deferred from road funding as far as from edit or other sources that would be going there. But he's the only one of them I can think of. I can't think of really area plan. I mean, I know that Bill Holder's here lots of times. I think
Yep.
he was part of your steering committee, so I
Yep.
think he's been involved.
So not as part of the county, but this morning on the radio on WRSW, they had a spot with K-21 because they're very close to giving out as much money as their corpus is, which is a really big deal. And Dan Spalding, of course, does those, and one of the Dan's comments was that K-21 intended to be involved with the New County Parks Board. And it was really interesting that that was part of the news. So maybe, although a number of us have talked to Rich informally, maybe a formal meeting with Rich would be a good idea. That's obviously a big potential funding source.
Outside of the county government, I think having connections with both Rich and Community Foundation, both, they've been supporters of the Parks and Rec all along. So I think anything we can do there to help have that, before you're coming out with hat in hand for money, that you're just informing them what you're doing, how things are coming, what are progressing, or do they have any necessarily action items they would like to see accomplished.
Yes. Well, if that's all for today, we've already got our next date on the June 29th. June 15th is canceled.
Yeah. And Rob, we had great discussions today on the RFP process.